Aloha, my name's Anna Covert, and I'm coming to you from my battleship here on the beautiful island of Oahu. This week on the Covert Code, the topic is data integrity and attribution in online marketing. And my special guest is Franni G, Director of Measurement at VEVO. When I first met Franni, I was at the beginning of my book tour in October of 2024, and we kicked it off in New York at the Beekman Hotel, where Quangcast had put on this beautiful event for me called Breakfast Bites. And when I first met Franni, we had just so much to talk about. And it's so rare that I meet someone who really just soaks up and loves data as much as I do, and maybe even more. So thank you so much for being here today to talk about the future of online advertising, because I just think it is, even since we met then, it has just changed so much and will continue to do so. So let's dive right in. Thank you so much for being here. To start us off, I know you just recently got this new job, VEVO.
Yes.
But you're a Quantcast for a long time. Tell us a little bit about your professional journey, and you've had a really interesting background, and why don't you share it with our viewers before we get really geeky?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I kind of found the world of data when I was in college at Cornell. While I was there, everybody was getting these really cool internships, and my family was like, "You have to find something that pays money." And so I found a market research company close to where I grew up, and it just found that the ability to track data to making decisions with clients was so valuable. And so I kind of continued my career there. I started out at an agency, working at Cara, and then it led me to working with data at NPD, which is now Circana, and then led me to Microsoft, L'Oreal, where I was working with data on the marketing side of things, and then came back to the media side. And for the last 7 years, up until this, and now, or actually almost 8 years, I've been in this digital space, really analyzing data, both on the upper funnel, mid funnel, and lower funnel capacities. I mean, I just love it. I love the ability to help clients look at the numbers and really be able to make decisions to help them grow their business.
Wow. Yes, that is really exciting. So tell me about this new role. I mean, I just saw before, that you just got this new job. Tell us about this new job.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about it. So I spent 4 years at Comcast. Loved the time that I was there, but was really looking to grow into the next level, and really looking for a company that was focused on insights and measurement. And I really feel Vivo is it. We have a nice team, and I'm leading a team where we're really focusing on measurement of campaigns, really digging into the data and understanding what's working, what's not working, and how to really grow our relationships with our clients. And so I'm really excited about it. Vivo is a music video platform. We are on CTV and on YouTube. And so it gives me an opportunity to use my skills that I've done on online video and CTV, but also expand to the new area of YouTube, which is not something I've ever had exposure to before. But obviously is where a big deal of the eyeballs are.
Sure is. Yes. I'm going to ask you. So, we talk a lot about, and I get asked a lot when I'm in doing public speaking about the deprecation of cookies, and cookielessness, and now Google's decided basically that they're like, yeah, we're not going to do it. Right. We decided that it's not a big deal. Right. What are your thoughts on what is the big deal about them not proceeding with this feature?
So I think that it's very interesting how much focus has been placed on Google specifically, because and the cookie deprecation of Google, because most of the cookies are gone. Right. So they've been gone for several years. Apple has come on, and, several years ago really didn't allow for that. And, obviously Firefox and plenty of others don't have cookies. We have digital that's no longer just on your computer, right? It's on our phones, it's on our TVs. So it's while it is a big deal that we're not getting rid of the cookies, because there will be some deterministic measurement that we could still be doing with those. It's not the full funnel or the full scope of media, and therefore, companies who really are like, oh, now we don't have to worry about cookieless anymore are really, really going to be at a huge disadvantage because focusing on those cookies are going to be a very small part of your share.
Yeah, and the way I always felt about it is that that's like that old data. That's like the stuff that, if you're holding a cookie and we're buying data, it's almost like buying a list. Like that it's
Yeah.
so old. By the time that we get it and we're using it, it's irrelevant.
Yep.
Right. And so, but I wonder if it's a way that Google's gonna, kind of try to fluff some of these numbers by continuing to use them.
Yeah, no, I do think that it keeps some of the control within Google's hands because
Yep.
nobody else has it. But because so much of it is already cookieless, and because they have implemented this idea that you have to opt in, right? Most people aren't going to do that anyway, so there's not going to be a lot of. But I agree with you. It's still Google's still staying in there, and I feel like it was a better decision for them as a company to keep the cookies around than to get rid of them because there's no, strategic advantage there.
Yeah, for sure. And what percentage do you think of people are opting out?
I mean, that's a great question, and we actually tried to get at those numbers, and I think it's a fair a majority, definitely more than half
Wow.
are opting out. Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers,
I'm just
but I
such a
know when we
sucker,
were
I guess,
looking
because
at it.
when you said that, I always opt in, and guess because I want the advertising. You know? Well, I want all
Yeah.
the personalization on the site, or I want the full experience. So I never really think about the people are opting out more at a bigger rate. That's worth looking into. So to pivot a little bit on that same note, what are you seeing in terms of or fraud prevention? Because I'll tell you, in my experience with YouTube in particular, first buying it directly from Google, right, through Google
Mhm.
Ads. I've had several ways, and I'll kind of quickly tell you my little background of Google of YouTube. So first, we started with just Google Ads, right, and we had some YouTube ads running, and okay, it was you couldn't. We were getting traffic, but we there wasn't really a lot of conversions there, and we're like, okay, well, we kind of figured it was just awarenessy, and
Mhm.
then it wasn't necessarily like panning out at the same rate. The views were low and or view through rate was low. And so we kind of were like, yeah, not that excited about it. But then Performance Max campaign came out. And that was, it seemed at the beginning like the holy grail because they brought back the ability to do Gmail targeting, which I
Yeah.
always liked, and then the map. But you couldn't pick, of course, where the ad ran. So that also didn't allow you to control the cost per click or anything, right? And then you have to, on top of that, believe that Google is running these impressions.
Yeah.
No third party verification at all, right? So it's like,
Right.
oh, are they or not, right? And I'll tell you, so we started this campaign for Get the Referral app, a client of ours, and we had a pretty big budget going. Where I think it was a couple $1,000s a day, So it was pretty. It was a
Yeah.
meaty campaign. It was a big one. And halfway through, oh my gosh, we start getting all these Slack messages. There are so many leads, and we think it is like the holy grail. We're like, oh, it's amazing, right? Come to
Right.
find out, we get into they had outbounds, or what was it called? Outbound.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, at the time they were using uh, HubSpot, but they were using that for controlling of their digital funnel. And I started looking through all of the 120 leads. There were only like 10, 15 that were real people. And it was blatant, Franny. Like you could see where you're
Yeah.
like Botzilla or like Joe at we don't care.com and like I mean, all the way down. And so we immediately kind of stopped it, even though I was apprehensive about it. And that was kind of the end of that for a while until because there was no fraud prevention. And then recently we tried to buy it through a third party who, verified that, the couldn't be skipped and this and that. But again, we had such even the clicks that were reported, which aren't that many, and we're not after clicks, but those were so far from matching anything on any programmatic that they did that it was hard to even believe that the impressions were running. So what are your thoughts on fraud? Because I know it's also popping up in CTV a lot too, and humans
Oh, yeah.
work to try to prevent it. So what is happening on the inside?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I definitely agree with you. I think especially as people are getting nervous about fraud, clicks are becoming less and less reliable. And if you are using click-based media, that's definitely where we're seeing a lot of that. But even on the CT reel, like you said, they have a lot of metrics or measurement that you can put in place where you're really only serving to a higher quality audience. Of course, it costs more, but it is worth it because you're right. There's so much out there that is trying to just bolster the cost of the media, especially on somebody like that's running on a cost per click basis. I don't like those kind of products. And definitely more recommend to our clients that we want to look at, somebody who's going to expand your reach and really looking at those reach and frequency metrics, or really looking at are you growing your brand awareness, your consideration, and ultimately your conversions. Of course, that's the holy grail. And looking at, is this supplier giving you incremental conversions? But absolutely, I think fraud is a really big topic. There are very clear ways to kind of block that out, even on YouTube, and especially on our platform on VEVO. We do have those capabilities. And it's really important that people do that because you're right.
What is the technology behind that? Like, how can you, like, safeguard a campaign inside of YouTube?
Yeah, no, so there are definitely companies that you can overlay audiences where you're able to, like an IAS audience or double verify. They all do. They do double check the inventory and make sure that you're only serving on these valid sites. So we're not, looking at we're not looking at those sites that are more likely visited by these bots.
Right. Yeah. I thought it was really shocking. So I met with Human the other day. I'm not sure if you guys subscribe or
Yeah,
not.
I'm familiar with them.
Oh, it was so impressive, and I just look for the day where the cost is going to come down so they can be more widely accepted, or becoming like a norm, and
Yep.
not something that. But I was shocked with the CTV in particular, and just for our listeners, I thought, how can there be fraud on CTV? It's not connected to your television box. But what they're doing is they're spoofing the
Yeah.
actual box itself, and they can say that that same box is being run in like multiple places at the same
Right.
time. And then when we give, unlike regular television inventory where there's like a pod or a pocket, so there's the actual film or whatever you're watching,
Mhm.
and they have little donuts, and we stick the media in them. And except in CTV, it's like woven together. So it's really hard for a lot of platforms to recognize the difference between, is it the commercial or is it the actual content?
Right.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting. So what is your view of attribution in video and CTV, YouTube? Like what are you looking at now, and how you help clients understand how to evaluate their reports?
Yeah, I think that in terms of attribution, it's really important to understand that the full funnel is really important. So historically, CTV and video were always seen at that upper funnel metric, but without them, you're not going to grow your overall audience to get to more conversion. So I think it's a long-term goal. I think it's really important to understand that. I am seeing more recently that some of those video content though are leading to the conversions, but it really depends on the category, right? A B2B is probably less so, something that's going to convert online. You need to use your CTV strategically with your display programming, whether it be a video, a native, or a display ad to really drive that conversion. And then when we look at something like a QSR, though, there are times that I've absolutely seen lift in incrementality on conversion from just watching that ad because it's something you remember, right? If Starbucks is running an ad where they're telling you they're going to have 4 for $10 drinks, you're going to remember that. And that you may not need that extra reminder because you're going to go into store and you're going to order it.
Right. And for everyone's listening, so QSR is quick service restaurant.
Yes.
Little industry term right there. But I think that you're right. And how are you? We always talk about attribution. Just for everyone listening, like, there's a view through, a 24-hour view through conversion. So we could say, okay, you went to our website. I'm a big fan of remarketing. It's like, wow, I got to where I am is from remarketing, or really aggressive remarketing. But someone came to your website, as for instance, they leave. Now they see our ad. So there's two different ways that you can attribute that to the campaign. If they click on it, we usually give it 30 days. So they clicked on it, they went to the site. Doesn't mean they have to buy it on that visit. But if they do return on within 30 days, we give it a click conversion attribution. Similarly, or I guess not that similarly, but if they just saw the ad and then within 24 hours they come to the site on their own and they convert, that they have to convert on that visit, then it's a view through conversion. And I think that's really important because now, as people are evaluating their partners and looking, I mean, I am shocked actually, Franny, even today that I see some companies trying to take attribution for top of funnel for a view, an impression over 90 to even 120 days.
Yeah, it really, I don't disagree with you. I do think it's more than in one day. I think that there's not an industry standard, but I also think it's dependent on the category, right? So for some categories, it's going to take a lot longer. I had one B2B client where they did do up to 90 to 120 days. But what they were looking at is not just did you view it and did you convert, but are you incremental in that conversion? So looking at two groups of consumers and really making sure that those two groups are balanced. And if everything else about those two groups are the same, whether visiting the same website, they have the same history with your company, same demographics within the organization, and one is getting a branded ad and one is not, then you're actually able to say this conversion that happened more over and above what we saw with that control group is actually being attributed to our ad. So what we're seeing is we're taking our view conversions and taking a chunk out of them and saying this is the percentage that actually is being driven by a view. And I think that's the best way to do CTV. I think there's a lot of work being done now in terms of what's the right methodology to put those two groups together, right? Should they be geo based? Should they be groups where it was like automatically holding out a certain number of device IDs or IP addresses and then serving other IP addresses? Should they be served a public service announcement and comparing that to a branded ad, or should we not serve them in ads at all? So there's a lot of work that's being done, but I think that incrementality piece is really important because upper funnel media doesn't have clicks. And because of fraud, as we talked about before, lower funnel media people aren't clicking on. I feel like that you're kind of limiting yourself by focusing there. So I do think it's more than one day across
Oh,
most
yeah, that
areas.
is remarking, like, so they already came to the site
Yeah.
and they left. So it's pretty, but so let's move it up a level. So that's kind of like,
Yeah.
standard for remarketing, right? Because they've already been to your website. Now they're like,
Yeah.
well, they're just there. But to get them to wherever they're going to be the first time, so that's, of course, it takes longer to, and like to your point,
Absolutely.
do they know you already? Are you brand new? Does no one know you? Where else could they have engaged with you? What is this whole story? But then, what else is there? Because I feel like when we look at a lot of reports today, and I my spidey senses like perk up and I'm like, of a frequency of like 2, 3 over 120 days. Well, we know with regular people's brains that just the way that their
Yeah.
brain work, that's not enough
Then I can remember. Right.
right? So it's like if you're telling me that you're going to associate that to some arbitrary. So what else can we do? How does this incremental? It sounds really important, right? How is there? I mean, are there any rules around this incremental, or how are we going to get on the same page as an industry about like what is the number of times someone has to see over this long period of time that breaks outside of critical mass messaging, which is
Absolutely. And I actually think it's funny when people talk about frequency and it's like for a full, like, 3-month period, right? Because you're right, 1 to 2 impressions aren't going to move the needle. I think it's about that constant measurement that's in place. So, when we were working with clients, when we would first start with, upper level awareness focused campaigns, or I love familiarity type campaigns, right? Because you're showing the person and introducing them the name of the product, but you're telling them more about the product. So they're learning the name and then they're learning a little bit, a fair amount, and a lot about the product. So I think it's going out there
like a how do you do? Is that a cute like a
from a brand left question.
commercial? Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you can run a CTV campaign and then you can run a brand lift study during that campaign to really understand where is your client, how many of them are even familiar with the brand name, and then how many need to learn more. And then you can understand how long does it take you. So I think personally, we can't come up with a standard unless you're looking at a particular campaign. Each campaign is going to have a unique standard. Each industry is going to be very different. And even the creatives, right? Some of them are going to be really, really clear and it takes very quick to understand what that ad is. And a lot of clients, I feel like, are running ads where it's so subtle on who are they that you have to look at this ad like 7 to 10 times before you even remember the name. And so, like, first of all, if you're trying to get your name out there, subtlety is not the way to do that. I know like there are large companies, that can do that very, very well. But if you're a new brand out there, you need to make sure you tell somebody who you are and what do you do. And then really understanding where do you sit in the marketplace when you start these type of campaigns, and then understanding how to talk to somebody differently when you're at that upper funnel, then moving those people down and being able to retarget them and remarket them to get to the middle and the lower fades. And I think a lot of times people think they miss that middle stage. They miss that site visitation or driving to site. That's an important stage. I had a client, one of my favorite stories. I had an online retailer who was, we were working with them. They're like, we only care about conversions. They were great guys, really, really sophisticated. And they told us that, we were running these campaigns when we first came out there. They're like, we're going to run display. And we said, oh, let's put native and video in there as well. They had the assets. So we did it. What we found was native and video were really driving the conversions, but display, by putting it in there, was not incremental at driving that conversion. But what they were incremental is they were driving people to the site. So what we were seeing is that like they were servicing that middle funnel. And so luckily we kind of rejiggered everything around. We focused display where it should be. We focused the other channels where they should be. And we ended up going and getting a double-digit incremental lift, which everybody was super excited about. And it's about that data honesty, really telling somebody, what is the data saying? And in this case, overall, it was flat. But we saw those pockets of how we could make it positive. So we did that and we moved the needle forward. And then they were like, well, we don't really care about these site visits. So let's suspend that display campaigns. Well, at that point, the conversions plummeted because it is very important to have that middle of the funnel. And the client was like, thank you so much, because now I have proof that it is really important to be at these two phases of the funnel, which is what we're working with you on. So I think that those kinds of anecdotes really help. And every company is going to be different. So
Absolutely, and I think that that's like the whole most important part is like the whole getting the whole story. And I think that's one of my
yes,
biggest fears of today, because when now there's all this degradation of data, and now the AI and the fraud, and like, can we, like us super nerds,
mhm,
make decisions if we can't trust this data, right?
yeah,
And that's the biggest, I think, problem, right? Is it trustworthy? I mean, like, at least at Quantcast, we knew it was trustworthy because it was all Quantcast proprietary data,
mhm,
right?
yeah.
So it's
And
like a
I
source of
think
truth. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that there's definitely some trust issues that people are having with the data in the marketplace. I do think overall the data is valuable and is still there. Some of it you have to understand that AI and harness it to really be able to utilize what kind of deterministic data that we have, and being able to extrapolate that out, using AI, using models, to be able to kind of pinpoint what is in that universe that isn't there. And that's been done for a very long time. I know way back in my days at NPD, one of one of my first roles at NPD, I was working trying to extrapolate the Walmart data. Walmart pulled all of their data out from all research partners. So very similar to the way we're seeing now, but this was in the retail space. And my job was to really extrapolate, look at past data, really understand how can we apply what's happening in the world now and within the technology sales world, the computers and things like that. And how can
Was it both to try to figure out what the pricing was going to be, or the demand?
the goal then was really try to figure out what is the overall market picture for like at the time it was like iPods were really big back then, so we go a long time ago. So let's say for an iPod, right? Really understanding within these music player category, and it wasn't just iPods, but they were mostly iPods. How were we going to understand what's that missing piece because we didn't get that Walmart data? And
Mm.
so there are methods that have been developed over time, and I do think that some of them are really really strong. And so I think really understanding. I also think validating in multiple sources is really important. With that retailer I talked about, they didn't only trust our data, and we really focused on having that measurement. Because I was working there as the expert, and I was not going to change the way the numbers were. I was going to tell you, here's where you're working and here's where we can do better. But they also were able to look at their own numbers and say, yeah, you know what? In this pockets of, we are seeing these new clients that we hadn't seen before. So I think that's another case that people need to be able to dig into their own data clients. And I don't think they're doing it as much as we would think they should be.
Yeah, well, and I think that that's also it's almost like when things aren't going well, that's when they look, and when things aren't going well, it's when they don't. And so I think that's another problem
Yeah.
for business owners today. It's like, you must, and that's why I wrote my book, right? It's like you must know what to look for because there are a lot of frauds out there, right? And there's a lot of people, and I'm not saying that they mean to be frauds. I don't think they even know that they are, but they're being taken advantage of, right? But it's like how long and how much money are you going to spend doing the same thing the same way before you're like, wow, well, we're not making any more money. Like you have to be on it the whole
Right.
time. But understand and not cut it too short. Like give it the time. But it's like those what are those trust signals that we can use early on to say, okay, yes, we trust that the data, what we're seeing is within margin. And now we are committed to this long-term vision. And what are some of these, so you're saying like some of these things we can do to, test incremental and brand lift audits. So can you give us an example of how one works? It's like a brand audit.
Sure, sure. I mean, I think it really just depends on, because those are very different things, right? So for brand left, I think it's making sure that you can understand what's going on throughout different parts of your campaign. Really important to have that instant feedback, so you can make those changes and then measure those changes to make sure whatever change was happening. Because there's certainly times when you make a change based on one time period, but if you're in December and you're making a change based on December for January, you're going to have a very different marketplace. And then, you may want to change again. But I think also, like I said, validating with your own information, making sure, getting granular. I think one of the things that I notice a lot of companies, measurement companies that I work with, is that they deliver a number at a high level, and Google is definitely guilty of this. Oh, you got a 5% lift, or you got a 10% lift, or whatever it is. Okay, how? Like, how did I get there? Right? Is it the younger audience or the older audience? Is it my 15-second or my 30-second? And being able to break those things down, and definitely within the demographic part of things, is it the males? Is it the females? I can kind of line up, even just anecdotally, okay, this audience is really being driven incrementally by my program or really growing in their awareness or their consideration. Am I seeing that now within that demographic audience within sales that I'm making? And usually you have to wait some time. I would say probably 30 days is a standard, depending on the industry. But you usually can get there. You can usually tie back pretty well. And I think that's the best way to do that double check.
So kind of just to recap, so you're sending you're once there is this event of higher sales or whatnot, you're taking it a level further by saying, okay, well, who were we targeting? What do they have in common? What are those pockets of similarity to then make an informed decision to say, okay, we believe that this creative in this time influenced this set of audiences in this way,
Correct.
right?
Correct. Because we're seeing that in our numbers.
And then how do you pick a control group? You would mentioned a control group. I think that's interesting. Like, how do we determine a control group?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's why I said, like, within the incrementality that I've always done, the one that I always preferred was a PSA type control group. And it was a randomization of, in the cookied world, it was picking certain cookies and keeping them tied to control messaging or no messaging at all, in certain groups. And it was literally a randomized samples, because the laws of randomization talk to that if you're randomly selecting people to be in each group at a certain percentage and keeping that constant, you are actually going to get similar groupings, and then not just assuming they're similar, but also double checking that. However, now that we've moved into this cookieless world, or a mix between cookies and cookieless, you need to do similar methodology, but using it at an individual level, right? So everybody has their personal IDs, which is going to span across different device types, and being able to kind of keep those as constant as possible to be able to compare those. But I think that randomization is really important. One of the things that we were working on before I left Quantcast was this idea of GOs and trying to figure out randomized DMAs. So trying to figure out DMAs that will be balanced at an overall level. Because like I worked with companies before in this space where they're like, okay, we're going to take Pennsylvania and California, and one's going to be controlled and you can't compare Pennsylvania and California. But literally somebody told me that's what they were doing. And I was like, that's not going to work. But if we pick out DMAs, there's going to be big DMAs and small DMAs and a good representation, and not just assuming New York to LA, but assuming that there's like 10 in one side and 10 in the other side, and they're fairly balanced overall. And we've picked them randomly. We haven't cherry picked them. And then being able to assume that. And I know there's a lot of work being done across a lot of different measurement vendors to be able to figure out that incremental change.
Well, let me make sure I understand. So what you would do is you would say, okay, here's a PSA like for not smoking or something like that.
Yeah.
What these people were exposed to. And there's that group, and then we expose our ad to those same people and then not to the same people. And then how are you doing it? You're doing like a survey to see if they recognize you, or how do you know that they
Yep.
were responding to the PSA?
No, it's a great question. In terms of the online conversion world, we have the conversions pixeled, right? So we can tie it back based upon that ID, right? So we have all of their information, and we're able to say, yep, this person is the same as the person that we served the ad to, and they made a conversion and they got that PSA conversion. PSA ad, or they got the branded ad. So it has to do with that online conversion. I know there's a lot of work being done in the foot traffic space where they're doing something similar, where they're tying, they're using GPS technology to figure out if somebody has been to a particular store, and they're being able to control and expose. And there's not a PSA message that is assigned there. It's really just these people went to the store and didn't get the ad, but they're in a similar demographic and psychographic grouping, and these people did get the ad, and therefore we can say incrementally they drove this many more visits.
Interesting. So you're really not, so when you say you're measuring a conversion, it's because of your Quantcast competitive conquesting. So you knew that that person who saw the PSA converted on that site. I guess when this conversion of the PSA versus non-PSA, I'm confused.
So yeah, so basically when we're serving a PSA ad, what we're doing is we're taking an audience. So we don't know if they're going to convert or not, right? There's no way to know that. But we're taking the entire audience that's on the internet, and we're assigning them to one of two groups. It's usually the breakout was about 80%, 20%, 20% getting the control ads and 80% getting the actual branded messaging. But
It's
it
not a public service
depends.
endorsement.
Well, it was
Okay, okay.
the public service was the control messaging.
Okay, okay, okay.
And so what we were doing is we were really understanding, you know, these people are qualified to get a message. Our models didn't know if they were in the control group or in the exposed group when they assigned them to get that message.
Oh, I
And then
see.
they went through the whole process and said, okay, this is a control person, serve them this. This is an exposed person, serve them branded. And then we were able to tell. So we were within the way that we were doing it at Quantcast, we were definitely predetermining who they were,
Mhm.
or predetermining that they qualified for the ad. Because what I think a lot of people do with measurement is very easy to fix it, to your point, to create these fraudulent groups. And what you really want to make sure is, are these groups really qualified to get your ads? Like
Right.
if you're serving somebody, if you're getting an ad to visit the Empire State Building and you have no intention to go to New York, and I'm getting it, that's not an equal audience.
That's not equal. No, exactly. And I think it's the same thing about, some of this data integrity just in general of like what we saw with lists and
Yeah.
kind of like, like why am I getting this ad at all? Right. And
Mhm.
I think that's really true. And so I got a question for you. So there's I had someone on my podcast, and she was talking about Facebook ads or different, and I think it will be a kind of maybe an interesting thing because it probably will follow you maybe to YouTube. We'll see.
Yeah.
But I was saying that one of the little pockets that her at the agency were working on is, so a lot of people like they skip a step and they're like, oh, I want to target a parent. So they're looking for that as a category, like parent of toddler.
Mhm.
But that's could be more expensive and more, you know, saturated than if they were like looking for someone who has purchased or has interest in, I don't know, like tall, jammies, like taller jammies
Yeah.
or something that, or like those little like, snacks, like the little puff snacks or something that would say that if that person's buying it, they are a parent of a toddler. No one else would buy it unless they were this person.
Mhm.
And then they're finding these little pockets of, easier to target, cheaper, less competition. What are your thoughts on some of these like abilities to use like, better learning to maximize results?
I think that's really important, actually. I think that's where I found a lot of success with our clients, across a lot of jobs that I've worked at in the past, is this idea of being creative on who are you targeting? Because you're right. And the thing is that like it's no longer that that 25 to 34-year-old is your new mom, right? New moms can be from 18 up to, I mean, I just had a friend who had a baby who was 48. So
Wow.
you can go across the gamut. So I do think that reading the data, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's really important to work with a company that does have somebody on, or a department really, who is focused on this insights and measurement, right? Because one of the things that I noticed coming on board to Quantcast when I introduced measurement is like there wasn't anybody to do that because everybody had a million jobs. And then it was my job to really like hone in on this is what the data is telling us and teaching everybody else how do you do this in the small scale. So I think it's really important to no longer purchase on are you a parent or are you 18 to 34? I think it's really important to understand what are you buying so that we can help you. And that's where I think AI is helpful, right? AI can dig into that. And, we used to joke, not even at Quantcast, but prior to Quantcast, that our AI was able to tell you when you were pregnant when you didn't even know it yet, based on what you were doing online. And I do think that's really important to understand, like, what are you buying and how can we target you even before you know it yourself.
Yeah, well, that then reminds me of a scary, the privacy thing. It was, I think it was not, maybe it was Walmart or one of those other retailers. I read about it in this book from the founder, a co-founder of Osano, is a big privacy protection club, and he was talking about how some, because this woman or a girl bought a test and then didn't pick up her birth control the next month or whatnot, then they made this assimilation. And then they started serving ads and sending her mail. And her father opened the mail, right? And was like,
My God.
was like, how far is this breach of, you may not, you may know, may not know, but what are we allowed to, how can we use that as advertisers? Like, what's the line of like, consent?
Right. Well, I do think that revealing you didn't pick up your birth control is definitely going past that line, right? The one part of the world that I know is very, very privacy focused is that pharmaceutical line, right? And I've done a lot of work with pharma companies throughout my career that is a clear breach. Whether somebody bought a test, now that's a consumer product, right? So that's a little bit less, or it's an over the counter type medication. There's a little bit less privacy there. So I think, but I also think that, it's a very, very difficult question to ask, right? Because, or answer, because while, we want to look for ads that are useful, if you think of the early days of the internet when you were getting all of these inappropriate ads, and everybody was getting them. I remember the email spams you were getting. It was pretty disgusting what I got. I'm much happier now that at least they're a lot more targeted, right, at me. Whereas, but on the other hand, to your point, something that crosses over to that health area, I think is probably something we don't want to mess with.
Yeah, and it also made me think about, the idea, because I hear a lot, and I'm sure you have too, and it's gonna only get more, where I have clients now that are like, oh, AI, like it's gonna know everything, right? And so we shouldn't have to do awareness advertising because the AI will know when someone is exactly ready for something, and then we'll just show them right then. And I think that that's like something that, maybe one day, but I'm going to say that I don't think that that's possible. And why is because humans, how do you know when you change your interest? Well, it's happening because you're changing it, right? It's
Yeah.
you're interested in, you know, the ocean, and now you're interested in something else, right? Or whatever it might be, right? But how that evolution occurred, is it overnight? Is it, I mean, maybe you could have an interest, but it's usually sparked by something, some event, some person, some experience you've had, some need that's become available to you. And then what's your first step? Well, you're doing research, right? You're pulling it down. You're not paying more attention to it as well. Like you may have seen that ad 20, 30 times, never like rang the doorbell, and now you're like, oh, that's I'm looking for a translation app, right? Or whatever it might be.
Yep.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on like how much AI can, like, how fast is it going to know, like, what are these signals that we talk about of that, can help people be more effective, I guess.
Yeah, I think AI is being built up to be more than it really is. It still does need that human interaction, and there's still a need to notify somebody that your brand exists before you actually, make that purchase. And there are a lot of things that are long purchase cycles, right? Like I just bought a car recently.
Ooh, nice.
Um,
What'd
yeah,
you get?
uh, and I feel like for I knew about all the cars. I had an idea that I wanted to be in that luxury line of cars because I was aware of the because was aware of the brands that are out there and what are their features that are offering and what kinds of things I wanted. But it wasn't really until I started getting those ads after I started searching for where can I find these things and really deliberating, do I want a new car? Do I want a pre-owned car? And things like that. And what brands do I want? I want to test drive them, right? The AI can't help me test drive a car. And AI can't help me with, they can tell me what features they have, but they can't really explain to me how it's important to me. That's where I need somebody else to be able to do that within the advertising world. So I do think it's really important to keep in mind AI has a time and a place to serve that ad to me while I was in the planning cycle of purchasing my car was great. But they weren't the ones who were able to long standing be like, yeah, I've always wanted a Lexus. And that's really where, I looked at other brands, but that was always in my head. And it wasn't because of one thing. It was because of things that happened across time. It was because I've always owned a Toyota and I love Toyotas. And I wanted to go one step above it. And the insides of the Lexus are the same, and there are things like that that AI just can't get at.
No.
And so I think there's that consumer journey that AI is never going to be able to understand because there isn't one signal, right? My signal is going to be different than your signals. And my signal 10 years ago when my children were little is going to be very different now than they're teenagers. So, there's a lot of different things going on that AI just can't get at.
Yeah, no, I think so, and then also, it makes me worried a little about, one of the things I liked about Quantcast was that, you kind of knew when someone was out of market, because I think that it's really annoying when you just buy something, right? Or you were looking, you're really involved, and then you made that decision and you purchased it, and now forever after you're still getting these ads. And it's like, well, that's, it's, I think, faster signals that this person's out of market are, maybe something AI can do. I mean, is that say you guys doing it before? But
Yeah.
also, how much, how are people, and how are we going to measure if people are being turned off to something because of all of a sudden now these ads? Like, maybe I'm just interested in knitting. Like, I'm looking into it, right? I'm not a knitter yet, but I'm
Mhm.
dabbling with the idea of knitting something. And I start looking, and now everything that I see is knitting, and it's like, you know what? Now I'm like just turned off about it because I'm seeing
Yep.
too much of it. Like, is there like how are we as an industry gonna kind of start to get better metrics to determine what is someone's, viewability score, I guess, but not just, I mean, can we look with their eyeballs on the screen? I mean, I know some of that technology's out, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think some of that is that third party versus first party data that we were talking about before.
Mhm.
If you have a list that's, yes, 12 months old, what I was doing 12 months ago is very different than what I'm doing now. And even 6 months ago or 3 months ago, everything's changing so rapidly that I do think you need that real time information to tell you. There, no, that's a, I was looking into knitting, but I'm not reading about knitting anymore. So I don't want knitting to be in that mindset. And if after a certain period of time, knitting is no longer a focus area of what I'm reading online or what types of products I'm buying, then we no longer want to be serving those kinds of ads. So I think there is a balance. I think third party data is definitely not it. But I also think it's really important to remember that sometimes we need to remind people of general things. So while knitting and that following that ad, we used to call it the red sweater when I was at Conversant. That red sweater was following you around. And sometimes that's really important. But I also think it's important to the variety of ads that people see. Because the other thing that turns people off is not just about knitting following you around, but just that same ad constantly coming up. Even if you are in market, I know there was remember when CTV first came out, we were pretty early adopters, being in the space, and my kids now know all about how TV works and advertising and things like that. And we were seeing the same ads over and over again because people really weren't buying the pods at that point, a long time ago. And then we got a cat. And at that point, we started getting, we started ordering from Chewy coming to our home, and we started getting animal ads and like pet ads, pet food and pet products and all. And the kids would get so excited, like, baby, no, it's actually a good thing to them and things like that. And so, but if we saw the same ad, because that happened plenty of times, should we serve that ad a million times? We were getting bored with them and we were getting annoyed by them. But if there was a variety in the same category, so I think there's a lot of things that we need to take into account, not just that red sweater or that knitting, but in general, providing a scope of things
Story
and
and
creating that data.
journey almost.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess to wrap it up here, tell me what trends do you see shaping the future of measurement and attribution, and what excites you the most?
Yeah, I definitely think, as I kind of touched upon before, some of the lines are being blurred. So CTV is no longer only an upper funnel metric, right? We can really see CTV driving certain categories of conversions, which I think is really exciting. And then the thing I'm seeing is, with cookies going away, we're seeing more and more companies wanting to rely on these media mix models and modeled approaches and being much more comfortable with probabilistic, because we need to understand deterministic isn't going to be the holy grail anymore. When in my past life, that's all we wanted to read about. But when without cookies, there isn't that. But to be comfortable with the fact that model data is going to be pretty good, and we're going to be making decisions off of it, and it is the best way to unify, because I think that's what everybody's trying to do, is unify all of their media on many different methodologies. I mean, I think the way to do that is through media mix modeling. And I think that's really going to help with everybody. But in general, I think also being understanding that things you can't, there's not a one size fits all to measurement or to creatives in media. And we need to be able to not judge a report card at a top line number. We were incremental or we weren't, but understanding we were incremental among that audience that saw our native ads, or we were incremental among the younger audience. So I think that's really important, for people to understand. And I think that's where the industry is going to be going.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's going to be an exciting journey out there. So, how can people get a hold of you, find you?
Yes, you can feel free to email me. I will. I can give you my home email. Is a friend 1976 at yahoo.com, or I'm on LinkedIn. I actually just got married, so it's listed under Franny Siegel Glick. And so feel free to reach out to me. Happy to have any conversations about attribution, measurement, or digital media.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here today, Franny. I'm excited to learn more about VEVO, and to stay connected. And for all of my listeners, thank you so much for joining us today. Please join me next week as I interview another industry expert in a topic to help you succeed on and offline. I thank you so much for all your likes. We're getting really, really close to this 30,000 subscribers on YouTube, and that's because of your support. So like us on your favorite channels, and I'll see you next week in the Pixels. Aloha. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Covert Code podcast. If you're loving the insights we share here, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more digital innovators like you. Share this episode with your friends and colleagues on social media and help spread the word. And if you're in the solar space or just curious about where clean energy is headed, I'm thrilled to announce my brand new podcast, The Solar Coaster. This show digs into the real stories, trends, and challenges of the solar industry, with bold conversations and powerful takeaways you won't hear anywhere else. Follow the Solar Coaster now so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for tuning in. See you in the Pixels. Aloha.